A powerless man who couldn't touch magic his entire life gets swallowed by a raven mid-conversation with two elite agents, and nobody even notices. His pets are hypnotized. His body is frozen. And the only thing standing between him and an army of wolves is a ring he swallowed as a child. Picture this. A quiet street. A small shop with almost no customers. A young man sitting behind a counter surrounded by weak little plants that nobody wants to buy. This is James Lin. And in a world where magical energy determines your entire worth, your status, your money, your survival, James has exactly zero. Not a little. Zero. His body literally cannot absorb spiritual energy. He was born like that. While other people were awakening powers and bonding with powerful creatures and climbing ranks, our guy was here, watering plants that even the most desperate buyers walked right past. And the worst part? The animals in the shop openly mocked his pets. That's the world James lives in. Magic runs through everything. Creatures aren't just companions. They have levels, skills, evolution paths. The more spiritual energy you have, the stronger your beast, the higher your rank, the more respect you get. People who master magic eventually command creatures that could level a city block. James commands a cat named Leo and a small bird named Shishib. Leo, until very recently, had the memory of a fish. Shishib could sing. That was it. But James never complained. He walked his pets in the middle of the workday because there were never any customers. He scraped together food money for them, even when he barely had enough for himself. After his parents died and his sister Emily left for magic school, Leo and Shishib were his whole world. He kept the shop running out of love. Not hope. Love. And then a wizard fell out of the sky. Not metaphorically. Literally. A powerful mage named Russell made an emergency landing right next to James's house. His spirit assistants were furious about the rough landing. Spirits don't exactly love being slammed into the ground, but Russell quieted them down fast. He'd spent years studying their weak points for exactly this kind of situation. Here's the thing, though. Russell, despite being genuinely powerful, couldn't always save the creatures around him. One of his dimensional visitors had taken damage during the crash. And before our guy could even fully process what was happening, James Lin, the man with no magic, stepped in to help. Leo assessed the situation immediately. Shishib used an artifact to heal the injured creature. The creature couldn't even show gratitude because its face was made entirely of bones. But Russell? Russell was grateful. He wasn't the type to trust strangers. Years of dangerous work had worn that habit out of him. But in that moment, he needed help and James gave it without hesitation. They parted ways. Russell told James he saw something promising in him. He said it was unlikely they'd ever cross paths again, but if they did, they'd be on the same side. And just like that, our nobody made his first powerful ally, without a single drop of magic. But that brief feeling of something good was about to get buried under a mountain of the same old misery. Days passed. The shop stayed empty. The plants stayed weak. Leo watched other animals with barely hidden envy. Shishib sang to herself in the back room. And James just kept going. Because what else do you do when the world has decided you don't matter? Then one ordinary afternoon, James took his pets for a walk. They did this regularly. Middle of the workday, no customers, might as well move around. Leo was trotting ahead, Shishib perched on James's shoulder, everything peaceful and boring and fine. And then out of absolutely nowhere, a mad magical pig appeared and started charging toward them. Not a regular pig, a magic pig. A furious, level 3, intelligence-free, destruction-only magical pig that had clearly lost its mind somewhere between wherever it came from and right here, right now, aimed directly at James and his pets. Leo misjudged it immediately. He went in confident and got knocked back. The pig didn't think. It didn't plan. It just destroyed. And our guy, the man with no powers, had nothing. No magic, no barrier, no attack, no defense. He grabbed his pets and he ran. They ran hard. Leo and Shishib pushed themselves to their limits, trying to slow the pig down. James pushed his body past everything it had. And then, right in the middle of the street, his legs gave out. He hit the ground. Exhausted. The pig still coming. And Leo and Shishib turned around. These two little animals, a cat with the memory of a fish and a bird that could sing, turned around and put themselves between their unconscious master and a monster that could flatten both of them without blinking. Because James had always been kind to them. That was enough. And something inside James, something that had been asleep since he was a child, finally woke up. It started as warmth in his chest, then a pulse, then a flood. Energy he had never felt before in his entire life poured through him from head to toe. His eyes opened, and he could sense things. The pig's magic, her level, her weak points. The air around her was suddenly readable to him in a way the whole world had never been before. Because the ring had come back. When James was a child, he had accidentally absorbed a ring. It disappeared the moment it touched his blood. Just gone, swallowed up inside him before anyone could stop it. His body had been so incompatible with spiritual energy that the ring simply waited, dormant for years, absorbing power, growing inside him without a single sign. Until right now. Until the moment he was about to die. The ring returned to his hand, and with it, every single ability it had accumulated across all those years came crashing back into James Lynn like a wave hitting a cliff. He could feel the pig was level 3. He was level 1. He couldn't just overpower her, not yet. He needed time to figure out how the ring worked. So he made a plan in seconds. He sent Shishib ahead. Her singing was already unsettling to humans. To a mindless creature like this pig, it was disorienting on a different level. The pig staggered, got angrier, slashed at Shishib, who dodged at the last second, barely. James pushed energy through the bracelet into the bird to keep her going. He could feel how much strength she had left. He could maintain her. Meanwhile, Leo had been creeping into position the entire time. Silent, patient, waiting. And then James gave the order. Leo launched himself at the pig's nose. One precise strike. The pig's one real weak point, and the cat hit it clean. The pig fled. James stood in the middle of the street, breathing hard, hands shaking, but standing. He had won a fight, for the first time in his life. And then he passed out completely. The pig continued through the city, because a fleeing mad pig doesn't stop just because the hero needs a moment. It ran straight into James's aunt and uncle, Chia and Lee Mayer. Chia noticed the signs of a prior fight on the animal. Lee handled it, because Chia's animals weren't built for combat. Somewhere across town, James was face down on the pavement with a cat and a bird sitting on him refusing to leave. When James finally opened his eyes, he wasn't on the street anymore. He was somewhere deeper than the pavement and the shop and the life he knew. He was in his own subconscious. And there was something waiting for him. The ring, which he understood now was a bracelet, a thing called Mobius, had spent years living inside him. Long enough to develop its own consciousness. Long enough to grow a presence. It had accumulated so much energy across so many years of sitting silent inside a boy who couldn't access it that the power was almost immeasurable. And now it was his. All of it. If he could figure out how to use it, the space felt enormous. Quiet. And somewhere deep inside it, he could feel that the real work was just beginning. He heard voices pulling him back. Familiar voices. Worried voices. He opened his eyes for real this time. Leo was pressing his full weight onto James's chest. Shishib was standing on his forehead. The hospital ceiling was above him. Aunt Chia was in the corner watching his face for any sign of worsening condition. The Mayer family had brought him in and arranged magic fish treatment to stabilize him. The doctor had already done his part and left. James looked at his pets. They had turned around and faced a monster to protect him. A cat and a bird. No levels worth mentioning. No attacks worth fearing. Just loyalty. And James Lynn, the boy nobody saw, quietly decided that things were going to be very, very different from here on out. He just didn't know yet how right he was. Because the moment he got home and stood in front of the weakest plant in his shop, the one he had been trying for years to level up without any success, he reached out, focused his energy the way the ring seemed to want him to, and felt something shift. The plant grew. Its spiritual aura expanded. Its level climbed. James stared at it with wide eyes. Leo wandered over. And then Leo stopped. Something had changed in him too. A passive wave of the upgrade had reached both pets while they stood close to their master during the awakening. Leo's eyes were sharper, clearer. His memory, which had previously been comparable to a very small fish, was suddenly, noticeably, actually working. Shishib flew a small loop and sang a powerless man who couldn't touch magic his entire life gets swallowed by a raven mid-conversation with 2 elite agents, and nobody even notices. His pets are hypnotized. His body is frozen. And the only thing standing between him and an army of wolves is a ring he swallowed as a child. Picture this. A quiet street. A small shop with almost no customers. A young man sitting behind a counter surrounded by weak little plants that nobody wants to buy. This is James Lin. And in a world where magical energy determines your entire worth, your status, your money, your survival, James has exactly zero. Not a little. Zero. His body literally cannot absorb spiritual energy. He was born like that. While other people were awakening powers and bonding with powerful creatures and climbing ranks, our guy was here, watering plants that even the most desperate buyers walked right past. And the worst part? The animals in the shop openly mocked his pets. That's the world James lives in. Magic runs through everything. Creatures aren't just companions. They have levels, skills, evolution paths. The more spiritual energy you have, the stronger your beast, the higher your rank, the more respect you get. People who master magic eventually command creatures that could level a city block. James commands a cat named Leo and a small bird named Shishib. Leo, until very recently, had the memory of a fish. Shishib could sing. That was it. But James never complained. He walked his pets in the middle of the workday because there were never any customers. He scraped together food money for them, even when he barely had enough for himself. After his parents died and his sister Emily left for magic school, Leo and Shishib were his whole world. He kept the shop running out of love. Not hope. Love. And then a wizard fell out of the sky. Not metaphorically. Literally. A powerful mage named Russell made an emergency landing right next to James's house. His spirit assistants were furious about the rough landing. Spirits don't exactly love being slammed into the ground, but Russell quieted them down fast. He'd spent years studying their weak points for exactly this kind of situation. Here's the thing, though. Russell, despite being genuinely powerful, couldn't always save the creatures around him. One of his dimensional visitors had taken damage during the crash. And before our guy could even fully process what was happening, James Lin, the man with no magic, stepped in to help. Leo assessed the situation immediately. Shishib used an artifact to heal the injured creature. The creature couldn't even show gratitude because its face was made entirely of bones. But Russell? Russell was grateful. He wasn't the type to trust strangers. Years of dangerous work had worn that habit out of him. But in that moment, he needed help and James gave it without hesitation. They parted ways. Russell told James he saw something promising in him. He said it was unlikely they'd ever cross paths again, but if they did, they'd be on the same side. And just like that, our nobody made his first powerful ally, without a single drop of magic. But that brief feeling of something good was about to get buried under a mountain of the same old misery. Days passed. The shop stayed empty. The plants stayed weak. Leo watched other animals with barely hidden envy. Shishib sang to herself in the back room. And James just kept going. Because what else do you do when the world has decided you don't matter? Then one ordinary afternoon, James took his pets for a walk. They did this regularly. Middle of the workday, no customers, might as well move around. Leo was trotting ahead, Shishib perched on James's shoulder, everything peaceful and boring and fine. And then out of absolutely nowhere, a mad magical pig appeared and started charging toward them. Not a regular pig, a magic pig. A furious, level 3, intelligence-free, destruction-only magical pig that had clearly lost its mind somewhere between wherever it came from and right here, right now, aimed directly at James and his pets. Leo misjudged it immediately. He went in confident and got knocked back. The pig didn't think. It didn't plan. It just destroyed. And our guy, the man with no powers, had nothing. No magic, no barrier, no attack, no defense. He grabbed his pets and he ran. They ran hard. Leo and Shishib pushed themselves to their limits, trying to slow the pig down. James pushed his body past everything it had. And then, right in the middle of the street, his legs gave out. He hit the ground. Exhausted. The pig still coming. And Leo and Shishib turned around. These two little animals, a cat with the memory of a fish and a bird that could sing, turned around and put themselves between their unconscious master and a monster that could flatten both of them without blinking. Because James had always been kind to them. That was enough. And something inside James, something that had been asleep since he was a child, finally woke up. It started as warmth in his chest, then a pulse, then a flood. Energy he had never felt before in his entire life poured through him from head to toe. His eyes opened, and he could sense things. the pig's magic, her level, her weak points. The air around her was suddenly readable to him in a way the whole world had never been before. Because the ring had come back. When James was a child, he had accidentally absorbed a ring. It disappeared the moment it touched his blood. Just gone, swallowed up inside him before anyone could stop it. His body had been so incompatible with spiritual energy that the ring simply waited, dormant for years, absorbing power, growing inside him without a single sign. Until right now. Until the moment he was about to die. Back at the shop, James was already asleep over his work table. Leo and Shishib had collapsed before him, exhausted from a day that had included a magical pig, a fire lizard, and more leveling than their little bodies had ever processed. The cat's new intelligence was already dreaming. The bird's new beauty was already being imagined in whatever birds dream about. And exactly 1 week later, Yannick came back. He was shaking when he arrived. Not from cold, from nerves. He had been afraid the entire time that James wouldn't deliver. That this would turn out to be some kind of strange dream he'd had at the festival involving a young man and exceptional plants. But James opened the door with complete calm. The delivery was ready. Every plant. Every one elite quality. Yannick walked through the shop, and his voice broke twice. James had done in 1 week what no supplier had managed to do for this man in years. The deal finalized. The money transferred. And that evening, Leo suddenly stopped mid-step and looked at his own paws. Something had changed. James leveling up had sent a ripple. Leo's intelligence sharpened again, noticeably this time. He felt it happening and turned to stare at James with an expression that said he had about 47 new thoughts and was not sure which one to communicate first. Shishib flew a loop and came down faster than she ever had before. Her attack ability had jumped. She landed and looked at her own wings. James watched his two friends discover themselves for the second time and felt something warm settle in his chest. And then it was time for Emily's selection day. James had been awake most of the night before. Emily Lynn was always the talented one. James had known it from the time they were kids. Even after their parents died, which hit both of them the way a building collapses, all at once, and then the dust keeps falling for years. Emily held herself together through sheer natural ability. She grasped things quickly. She adapted fast. She made teachers look at her the way teachers look at students once a decade. That quiet, stunned expression of someone realizing they are witnessing something real. So James did the only thing a broke, powerless older brother with a shop full of unsellable plants could do. He scraped together every bit of money he had and sent her to the best magic school he could afford. He kept the shop running. Barely. She was thriving. That was enough. But now she was calling. And the news was simple and brutal. Every student at her school had to choose a creature companion. And Emily had already decided. She was going to pick a small, ordinary beetle. Not because she wanted to. Because her family had almost no money, and she wasn't going to be a burden on the brother who was already paying for everything. James listened to all of this and felt something tighten in his chest. Her teacher had already contacted him separately. The woman was practically vibrating with distress. She had seen Emily's potential and could not accept that this girl was going to walk into the arena with a common beetle while other students showed up with powerful beasts. If Emily had a proper creature, her future was exceptional. If she didn't, she would spend the next several years climbing out of a disadvantage that should never have existed. James had days to fix this. He had almost no money, and he had a new power that could evolve anything. Time to go to the festival. The Creature Festival was exactly what it sounded like. A massive event where merchants displayed animals, beasts, magical insects, and creatures of every kind. Buyers with money walked through and made deals. Leo was practically vibrating with excitement the moment they arrived. James was calculating prices in his head and trying not to panic. Everything was too expensive. Every creature worth having was priced in amounts that would take James months to earn. Leo rushed off immediately to try and bargain on something. Predictably for a creature James didn't actually want, and James had to pull him back and refocus. He needed something right for Emily. Something peaceful. Something protective. Something that suited his sister's temperament and fighting style. He found a sheep. Peaceful nature, defensive abilities, protective instincts. Emily would build a friendship with that animal in days. He asked the price. Too high. He offered more than the asking price anyway. Still not enough. The merchant wanted double. James walked away from the festival with nothing. And then he heard a merchant talking about wounded animals, Creatures in terrible condition, too expensive to treat, sold cheap. James found the man. His name was Yannick. He had hidden animals behind his main stall, beasts whose medical bills would ruin most buyers. James used the bracelet's influence to charm Yannick into showing him what was back there. The animals were dying. Any normal buyer would have walked away. James saw a job he could actually do. He proposed a trade, plants for creatures. Yannick was skeptical. A strange young man was standing here offering him flowers in exchange for half-dead animals. But something about James made Yannick believe him. They shook hands. Yannick then revealed a magic cube, a container that could hold creatures of any size. Leo had never seen anything like it and could not contain himself. But the real reveal was Yannick's personal pet, a high-level fire lizard with enormous wings, capable of flight. The lizard had been raised by Yannick from birth and had reached a level that made most people at the festival deeply uncomfortable with its presence. They had to leave the festival immediately. The lizard was ready to fly the second it was allowed. James barely grabbed onto it in time. The flight home was short. James lived close, but it was the first time he had ever been in the air, clinging to a fire lizard while Leo yelled things from the ground below. Yannick visited the shop afterward and had a complete emotional breakdown. Not a metaphorical one. The man walked through the door, looked at James's plants. All leveled up, all elite quality. And his face did something that a grown merchant in his profession was probably not supposed to do in front of a client. He had been trying to find plants like this from companies across the country for years. Everyone had turned him down. He had dreamed of opening a plant farm his entire life. And here was a kid in a tiny shop with hundreds of them. Yannick offered a fair price per plant and said he needed several hundred of the same quality within a week. James agreed. The deal was done, and James finally had funding to do what he actually needed to do. The moment Yannick left, James went to work on the injured bull. This was the creature he planned to give Emily. Not a sheep, something far better. He had spotted it in Yannick's hidden collection and known immediately. He focused his energy into the bull's failing body, working against a magical barrier that formed around the beast as its level resisted change. James pushed through it, terrified of making a mistake because a mistake here was fatal for the animal. He applied everything he had. The bull broke through. Its level climbed, and now James had to choose what it became. He thought about Emily. Fragile-looking, fierce-hearted. She needed a creature that would stand in front of every blow that ever came toward her and not flinch. Not a beast that attacked, a beast that absorbed. He chose healing, self-recovery, as the bull's primary ability. After the evolution, the bull stood ready to make a contract with its new owner. And James was standing there realizing that for the first time in his life, he had done something that mattered. He felt stronger himself just from the act. Every creature he leveled gave something back. Meanwhile, across the city, under the night sky near the royal palace, something else was happening. The ruler of this country, a young woman named Lanali whose magical energy was so overwhelming that nobody dared argue with her about anything, was personally administering a blessing to two city lords. One of them, a man named Shirkon, needed his Black Panther leveled up. Lanali cast the spell and the panther collapsed in pain, because this was the only way she could control the leveling process. The cat's wild cry echoed for kilometers. Lanali thought, while the panther recovered, about the upcoming mage trials. Tests designed to find exceptional candidates. She had already authorized granting elevated status to standout performers. But more than that, she needed a student. Someone strong enough to stand behind her, because without that kind of support, her position was more vulnerable than most people knew. She thought about what kind of person could actually fill that role. Then the panther steadied, and she filed the thought away. And the tokens on the advertisement were identical to the ones James had seen as a child. The ones that were at his parents' workplace after they never came home. He stood in front of that advertisement for a long time without moving. His pets waited beside him. He didn't say anything. He took the walk home in silence. He told them nothing. And that night, while Leo slept and Shashib was dreaming about, the next few weeks were the most productive of James Lin's entire life. He set up a virtual store, or rather, Leo set it up, because the cat's newly functional intelligence had found a direction and was sprinting in it. Documentation, registration, a magic card for financial transactions that had scanning properties so goods didn't need to be entered manually. James came home one evening to find the entire storefront fully registered and operational. He stared at his cat for a long moment. Leo stared back with the expression of someone waiting for a compliment. The first real customer arrived quickly. Her name was Raleigh Moline. She walked into the virtual space like she owned it, immediately went to the most expensive items, and James noticed within 30 seconds that she had no hair. Leo, whose intelligence had improved but whose filter had not, said exactly what he was thinking out loud. Raleigh's story came out sharp and uncomfortable. Not long ago, she had been bitten by a massive poisonous spider. The hair loss was a side effect, still growing back, deeply personal, and something she did not want discussed. James handled the moment with more care than most people would have. He gave her space to recover without making it worse. Raleigh needed spiders. Not regular spiders. Spiders evolved toward specific abilities that she couldn't find anywhere in the market. She was a spider contractor by bond since childhood, which meant she couldn't just switch to a different animal type. She had been searching for months. James had a spider that had evolved into the poisonous path during a recent evolution. A combination so rare that when Raleigh saw it, she literally lost her balance. But his current stock wasn't at the level she needed. She was about to leave. James turned his back. Raleigh stopped walking. She didn't like losing an option. She came back, left a deposit, became his first regular high-value client. And James, who had predicted exactly this reaction from the moment her hand moved toward the door, kept his face perfectly calm. The money disappeared almost immediately into production costs. Leo sank into visible despair watching the numbers drop. James had nothing comforting to say. He went instead to the space inside the bracelet, to Mobius, and talked through the plan. Mobius listened, did not fully approve of the rush, but said nothing against the master's decisions. Then James went and bought a goldfish. Not because goldfish were popular. They weren't. Their development was unpredictably slow and most buyers considered them a waste of effort. But James needed practice. He found a store owned by a cheerful, lonely, extremely talkative woman named Che Milan who hadn't had a real customer in days and attached herself to James with both arms and a lifetime of stored conversation. He bought a common goldfish, then bought a large amount of food for it, the biggest single order Che had received in a long time. Her attitude toward him transformed instantly. James pretended to be wealthier than he was, maintained the role throughout the visit, and left with a fish, a supplier, and a woman who was already planning their next 20 meetings. That evening, he went to the festival battle arena, not to fight, to watch, and Raleigh was already there. They saw each other at the same moment, stood there for a second too long. Then Raleigh turned back to the ring, and James quietly moved to stand beside her, which she allowed without commenting on. Two high-ranked sorceresses were fighting. Seal, fire element, aggressive, powerful beast, every attack designed to end things fast. Daisy, frost specialist, healer, a small plant companion that looked laughable next to Seal's giant. The fight was a masterclass in the difference between power and control. Seal threw everything. Explosions, the beast, raw energy, combinations that lit up the entire arena and had people in the crowd leaning back in their seats. The ring barrier held, barely, and Daisy, who was ranked higher, just waited. Her pets covered each other. Her reserves grew. And then, when the moment was right, she released a frost spell so comprehensive that it buried almost every one of Seal's animals under ice simultaneously. Some of her own pets got caught. She healed them immediately. She had planned for that exact outcome from the beginning. James filed every detail away. This was the battle style he wanted. Calm, prepared, every move already 3 moves ahead. He went home that night and discovered his pets had been running an online channel. Shashib, disguised as a sweet human girl, with Leo supervising the operation from behind the screen, had been performing online for weeks. She had a crowd of fans. Donations were coming in. Leo had conceived the entire scheme and managed the logistics. The bird was performing for people who thought she was human and loved her for it. James looked at them. They looked at him. He approved it. Because he genuinely couldn't argue with results, and because the bird's joy in that moment was unmistakable. What he didn't say out loud was the cold thought that settled in the back of his mind. A man named Ralph Lauren was somewhere in this country, hunting for powerful magical talent, and he had reportedly been following the trail of a beautiful unknown singer online. If Ralph ever connected those dots, Shashib's secret would collapse. But that problem was for later. Right now, there was a rift seed sitting in a box from two people James hadn't met yet, and a night walk that was about to change everything again. He had seen an advertisement, two of them, back to back on the same wall. First, the path to obtaining a second-rank mage status, a formal promotion that James now had enough strength to actually consider. Second, the Spirit Suppression Bureau, agents who fought rifts for a living. Nobody questioned it. He did not tell them what happened. He never planned to. They flew home. Leo and Shishib collapsed the moment they hit the bed, the kind of collapse that means nothing is moving for many hours. James sat awake with the rift seed in his hands and thought about what had just occurred. The blood had activated it. That was the trigger. He was almost certain of it. He gave it more drops deliberately, a few at a time. He felt a contract forming, felt something reaching back toward him from inside the seed. He kept going. More drops. He pushed until he was nearly out of strength, nearly empty, his hands unsteady over the pot. A healing flower sat close enough that its energy kept him from tipping over the edge completely. The seed cracked, split, grew. Something climbed out. A plant with vines and fangs that grinned at him with an expression that suggested it had opinions about everything and intended to share them. James stared at it. It stared back. He named it Shippy. Then he offered it food. Shippy refused everything. James tried again. Shippy refused again. He tried 7 more things, and Shippy refused every single one with the particular energy of a creature that knows exactly what it wants and has zero interest in accepting substitutes. Leo wandered in from the bedroom, yawning, and transformed into the analytical glasses to scan the new plant. The glasses immediately identified the issue. Shippy ate anomalous creatures. James looked at his new Sicily's creature was a giant owl. Not big, giant. The kind of wingspan that made you recalibrate your understanding of what the word bird meant. She called it like it was nothing, and it descended like it had been waiting just out of sight the whole time. Dan's purple wolf materialized at their feet, a creature whose aura was so controlled and focused that James felt it in his teeth. They entered the rift. The space changed immediately. Not gradually, immediately. One step and the world was different. Colors wrong. Sounds layered on top of each other in a way that had no logic. Leo pressed close. Shishib gripped James's shoulder harder than usual. Small creatures noticed the group instantly and moved toward them as prey. Dan crushed the first one before it reached them. One motion. The wolf handled everything within 20 meters like it was doing housework. Sicily wasn't even paying attention. The low-level creatures weren't worth her time. James watched both agents move and understood for the first time the gap that existed between his current strength and what a professional combat mage actually was. But he stored every detail, every movement, every decision. Dan's wolf was extraordinary. One animal, but it could summon an entire flock when threatened. Its aura created a barrier that nothing wanted to cross. James asked how many creatures Dan had. Dan smiled and said nothing. Of course he did. The pets noticed the raven first. It had been watching them from above since they entered. Not attacking, not retreating, just watching with the particular stillness of something that has chosen its moment and is waiting for it. James looked up and felt no particular alarm. He was standing between 2 elite agents. That was his mistake. The raven acted, not with claws, with something subtler and infinitely more dangerous. James felt the world tilt sideways. Not literally. From the outside, he simply went still. Sicily kept her eyes on the surroundings and maintained his body's protection without realizing his consciousness had been yanked out of it entirely. Dan swept the area. Neither of them looked directly at James. Neither of them noticed. And inside the raven's dimension, James was falling. Fast. Into darkness. Shishib tried to slow the descent and couldn't. She was small and the fall was faster than anything her wings could handle. The ground of this strange place came up and James landed impossibly softly, like the dimension had caught him. He had no time to appreciate the physics because the raven was already there, already building. This was what the raven did. It hunted humans specifically, chose the weakest one it could find in any group, pulled them in while the strong ones were distracted, and then overwhelmed them with an army. It had done this many times. It had a hatred for humanity so deep and so genuine that it had become the creature's entire purpose. It thought James would be easy. Leo and Shishib came in ready to fight, and the raven put them both in hypnosis within 2 minutes. It was that fast. They had leveled up, They were genuinely better than before, and it still wasn't close. The traps closed around them before they could process what was happening. James looked at his frozen pets. Then he looked at the raven, and Mobius opened up inside him. With the bracelet's help, James could see through every illusion in this dimension. The hypnosis that had locked his pets wasn't real force, it was perception. It was a picture drawn over the truth. And James pulled the picture off. Leo snapped awake. Shashib shook herself midair. Both of them looked around with the expression of someone who cannot believe they fell for that. The raven did not adjust its plans. It simply escalated. Real wolves this time. Not illusions. Actual physical creatures with actual attacks and actual strength that poured into the space in a pack that was genuinely, numerically overwhelming. Shashib moved like she was made of wind. Every time the wolves lunged, she had already left. Every attack that should have landed missed by the distance of a wingspan. She made them angrier with every dodge, more frenzied, less coordinated, because chaos was what she was creating while Leo worked. Leo, in his glasses form, was scanning everything. Every wolf, every movement pattern, every weak point. He fed the information to Shashib in real time, and she started hitting exactly where it hurt. The raven watched its army struggle and felt something it had probably not felt in a long time. Then James's blood fell on the rift seed. He didn't plan it. A small cut from the chaos. A drop of blood hit the seed where it sat in his pocket, and the reaction was instantaneous. Power erupted outward. Not gently, not gradually. An explosion of energy that saturated both pets in an instant. Leo moved at a speed that made the wolves look stationary. Shashib hit with force that had no right to come from a bird her size. The pack broke. The raven, who had chosen James specifically because he seemed like the weakest target available, found itself facing something it had not prepared for, something it could not contain. And James, for the first time in this dimension, was not on the defensive. The raven was left behind when James pulled back into consciousness. He opened his eyes. Dan was watching him carefully. Cicely had never looked away from the surroundings. James blinked twice and said he'd gotten a little tired and rested his eyes. James told Shashib to wait. Let it self-destruct just enough. Then she delivered the final blow and the merged form collapsed entirely. Tony stood there without a single thing left to use. He had lost. His first defeat in the tower. And somewhere in his silence James saw something that didn't look like arrogance. It looked like fear. Something about his father. Something about what losing meant in his household. James didn't have time to think about it further because Tony made one last desperate attempt that Shashib avoided entirely, and then it was over. James did not continue up the tower. Leo and Shashib were spent. He was drained. Someone in the lobby watched him leave with the focused attention of a person who had been sent to find strong opponents. But James walked past without engaging. Let them wonder. Back in the Mobius space later, the goldfish had its moment. James used real dragon's blood, a mixture that had cost him more than he wanted to think about, on the common goldfish he had bought from Chase shop. The fish reacted immediately, went into full transformation, encased itself in an egg, and hatched as something entirely unrecognizable. The other fish in the space celebrated in the way fish celebrate, which is mostly ambient enthusiasm. James chose healing ability for the evolved fish. He was building a set. Everything pointing the same direction. Support, leveling Leo and Shashib was the next priority. James had been careful about timing. He didn't want to push them before they were ready. A bad evolution could set a creature back further than not evolving at all. But when he checked their auras and confirmed they were ready, he didn't waste any more time. Shashib went first because she physically could not wait any longer. She hovered in front of James with an energy that communicated urgency in a way that required no words. He channeled into her, and she went through the process lit up with excitement the entire time, filling with strength in waves she could visibly feel. For her new ability, James chose weather control, effective against elemental opponents. Versatile, unexpected, and for a bird who had already been dodging and redirecting attacks, the ability to manipulate the air around a fight was a natural extension of everything she already did. Leo watched with barely contained impatience and the look of someone who had already decided exactly what he wanted. His turn came. The process for the cat did not go smoothly. The energy aura kept shifting around him in a way that felt like tickling, and Leo was deeply sensitive to tickling, as it turned out. He endured. He squeezed his eyes shut and held through it, until the sensation became impossible to bear. He sneezed. He evolved. His appearance changed noticeably. The level directly improved how he looked, and Leo stood up straight afterward with the manner of someone who has just confirmed a long-held belief about their own potential. Then James offered the ability choice, and Leo said, with complete conviction, that he wanted to transform into a useful object. James thought this was probably not the best evolutionary direction. Leo was not interested in James's doubts. James gave him the ability. Leo became a pair of glasses. Analytical, scanning, capable of reading the aura, level, skills, and weak points of any creature they were turned toward. He immediately pointed himself at Shippy and within seconds confirmed what food the plant needed. James put on his new cat glasses and went to find anomalous creature food from Che. Shippy ate it with the enthusiasm of someone who has been waiting their entire short existence for exactly this meal. Then Shippy evolved. Quickly, visibly, completely, one evolution triggered by the right food at the right moment. New abilities emerged that James was genuinely impressed by. He forgave the previous food refusals immediately. Then he noticed Shippy watching Leo with an expression that suggested the plant was calculating whether Leo counted as food. James urgently doubled the order. The magic tower was the next step. James wanted to test himself, not his creatures, himself. The tower generated random combat challenges at escalating difficulty levels. Registration was complicated and slow. The assistant who handled intake looked at James and his companions and made a quiet, sarcastic observation. Leo and Shishib interpreted this as a compliment and thanked him warmly. The assistant was briefly too confused to respond. Early levels were embarrassing. Not for James, for his opponents. An old man with a beetle that Leo defeated with one paw. Mid-tier opponents who gave Shishib something to do for about 90 seconds. The pets started to visibly deflate from the lack of challenge. Leo, in glasses form, was scanning enemies who weren't worth scanning. Then Tony Dune appeared on the display. 3 snakes. Combat record that made other tower challengers nervous. Narcissism so total and so loud that James could hear it before Tony finished his first sentence. The man walked in talking about himself and didn't stop. He looked at James and saw something that did not concern him. James said nothing. He watched. The fight started and Shishib went in first. Brilliant first strike, clean and fast. Tony's snakes answered with a protective fog that absorbed it. More attacks. The fog adapted. Tony wasn't careless despite everything he said. He had prepared for multiple approaches, and he adjusted to each one in real time while continuing to talk. But Leo was scanning. Every snake. Every movement. Building a complete picture in silence. James opened the Mobius space and fed energy into Shishib mid-fight. She stopped tiring. Tony poured more into the snakes. The bird kept pushing. Then Leo finished, and the information came through. 3 separate weak points. 1 on each snake. All mapped. All accessible. Shishib shifted targets. Started hitting exactly right. Tony recognized what was happening and answered by sending all 3 snakes simultaneously in a way that was physically overwhelming. The bird dodged 1. Barely. The second clipped her. The third was already moving for James. James channeled everything remaining into Shishib. She twisted in the air and used one snake's own attack vector against the other. Redirected. Converged. The resulting explosion was so large that the arena barrier rattled. 2 snakes were out of it. Tony finally stopped talking. He had 1 snake left, and he activated a technique his family had spent years developing. The 3 snakes merged. Forced fusion, painful for the animals, creating a single creature from 3 that was technically more powerful but internally unstable. James felt the combined aura and also immediately felt something else. The merged creature was damaging itself. The fusion was too aggressive. The snakes were fighting each other inside the combination. James watched Paul leave and felt the strange, slightly unreal sensation of a life that had recently decided to be very full all at once. He barely had time to process before he got home and found Shippy had eaten the backyard. The plant had expanded its vines across every surface, reaching toward the door, toward the windows, toward James the moment he walked in. Not aggressively. Shippy was just hungry and expressive about it. Shishib had been unable to contain it. James calmed Shippy down with the confidence of someone who knows their plant would not actually consume them, even if the optics suggested otherwise. Then Che's surprise boxes arrived. 3 of them. Gifts from a supplier who was investing in a client relationship. An antelope in poor condition, treatable. A piece of wood that Leo's scanning glasses identified as the remains of a high-level magical tree spirit, extraordinarily valuable. And the last box, a rare mineral. Che was clever. She had sent exactly the things that would bring James back to her door asking to buy more. It worked within 24 hours. He went to her shop, confirmed the gifts were intentional, and listened to what she actually needed. She wanted to buy from him. She had heard about his rare creatures and needed a reliable supplier, someone who never produced inferior goods, who could be trusted on quality, who wouldn't disappear after one order. James agreed. The deal made both of them secure in ways neither had been before. He returned home to Paul Wilson sitting at the kitchen table making business suggestions. Paul had made friends with Leo, with Shishib, with the antelope, with every creature in the space except Shippy, who watched the new arrival with an expression that did not communicate warmth. Paul had analyzed James's income while James was out and had thoughts about it. He had connections in multiple cities and had already identified a building in the capital that would be. The second-rank mage exam was the most crowded event James had attended since the festival. Anxious candidates filled every space. Some of them had been preparing for this exam for years. A single failure meant waiting another full year to try again. The weight of that was visible on every face in the room. James walked through it with Leo disguised as glasses on his face and the quiet calm of someone who had already faced things that made written exams feel manageable. Leonora Dabby, granddaughter of the chief examiner Ning, was watching from the edge of the room, offering quiet encouragement to the candidates who were failing the early rounds. She was warm in a way that felt genuine rather than performed. James didn't have identification. He had to be assessed directly by the head. Ning Dabby met him in the hallway and immediately, before doing anything else, asked a trick question. Which ancient predator was the most powerful? The question had a specific answer Ning had been expecting from candidates for years, an answer his granddaughter knew and was quietly trying to signal toward James without being caught doing it. James didn't use her hint. He answered that both ancient predators were extinct, and an extinct creature, no matter how powerful it was in its time, is by definition too weak to survive the present. Humanity, on the other hand, had been adapting and surviving for centuries. If strength is measured by survival in the current world, humans were the answer. Ning said nothing for several seconds. He had never heard that version before in decades of asking the question. James was fast-tracked into the exam. The test itself was a weasel, deliberately chosen by Ning to be as difficult as possible, hungry, nervous, unpredictable, allergic to conventional calming techniques. Most experienced candidates were red-faced and struggling. James used Leo's knowledge base to understand the animal's specific psychology and had it settled within minutes. He completed every part of the exam in under an hour. Ning refused to take his results. Not because James had failed, because Ning thought he was too good to rush through. He wanted to see him again tomorrow. He took James privately to a sealed pool, a space he showed to almost no one, and revealed a magic shark that he had been raising for more than half his career, working toward megalodon evolution. The shark had refused to evolve for months despite being fed real dragon's blood. Ning asked James to bring dragon's blood for him. James thought briefly and hopefully that it might be a gift. Ning clarified. It was for the shark. Day 2 of the exam was a crab with completely destroyed internal life space. James had to restore it under time pressure. Progress was agonizingly slow. He used the Mobius space's energy reserves. The crab stabilized, and then immediately worsened. The rapid healing had damaged internal organs. James reprioritized the creature's life over its appearance. He summoned Mobius's full remaining power and worked against the deadline. He finished with seconds to spare. He had also managed to level up a plant during the test. Leonora noticed. Ning noticed. And Marie Prompty, who had personally attended to scout talent, finally had everything she needed. James received his second-rank medal. Marie celebrated so loudly she had to be escorted from the hall. Ning quietly gave James 2 assistant tokens and said nothing else. James understood, on the walkout, that Ralph's role in the story made more sense now. Ralph had been someone's assistant. and now James had the rank to acquire his own. He returned to the pavilion for the eggs. The merchant was being attacked by an aggressive customer when James arrived. Someone who had apparently decided that physical intimidation was a reasonable response to not getting a good price on eggs. James's rank badge stopped that conversation immediately. The customer's posture changed the moment he saw it. The merchant led James to a private room. Inside, not the eggs yet, his creature. A massive insect in catastrophic condition. The merchant and the insect shared every sensation, which meant the insect's near-death state had been the merchant's constant reality for years. James began stabilizing the creature before the merchant finished explaining the situation. The insect's aura steadied. The merchant stared. He had been to every powerful wizard he could access over many years. He had been turned away as too complicated by people whose names were known across the country. James had done in 5 minutes what none of them would even attempt. The merchant said his name was Paul Wilson, the same Paul Wilson that Ralph Lauren had been hunting across cities for months. Before James could respond to any of this, Paul recited a binding assistant oath. The contract locked. Done. James had a new assistant and had not agreed to this in any conscious way. He stood there processing the fact that a man who was apparently famous enough to have a professional hunter assigned to his case had just voluntarily become his employee in the space of about 90 seconds. Paul explained himself without apology. The insect meant everything to him. James was the only person he had ever met who could actually help. And Paul, who had apparently operated on a philosophy of decisive action for his entire life, had found his answer and committed to it before doubt could complicate things. He also did not give James the cocoon eggs for free despite now being his assistant. They still had terms. Business was business. James stepped forward too. He addressed the caretaker directly. He said the old man shouldn't suffer for his grandson's stupidity. He named the Kim family's contributions to the empire, real ones, not flattery. He argued that real wisdom didn't feed on the weakness of an elderly man who had done nothing wrong in this room today. The caretaker listened to all of it. Then she revealed what she had actually been doing. The entire time, she had been checking James's character. His biography showed a pure aura, but character couldn't be read the same way power could. She had engineered the moment to see what he would do when the opportunity to stay silent cost him nothing and speaking up might cost him something. He had passed. Thomas was released with the requirement to follow his grandfather's example. He left furious, humiliated, unwilling to acknowledge any part of what had just occurred. Liam received gifts from Rosie for his performance. He told James directly, without preamble, without drama, that he was no longer competing for the student role. He had made his judgment, and it was James. The elder Kim left as quickly as dignity allowed. And then the caretaker turned to James and told him the ruler was ready to see him. She gave him what instructions she could on the walk. She told him to be respectful. She told him not to say anything stupid. She could not go with him all the way. Marie gave him a few last words at the edge of the path, genuine, warm, carrying all the